My guest today is Noel Elie, who's an actress, filmmaker, producer, and lifestyle and wellness TV personality who's appeared on many hit television shows, including CBS's Blue Bloods, the CW's Dynasty, NBC's Shades of Blue, ABC's Shark Tank, and regularly frequents HSN as a guest expert. She's also the founder of an international production and PR company, Noel Elie Productions, where she helps thought leaders and changemakers amplify their voice to inspire the world around them. In today's episode, Noel will share her inspirational story with us today. Welcome to my show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am looking forward to this. That was quite a mouthful for me to say because you've done so many things. I can't wait for you to talk more about you. Now, I've had the pleasure of working with some of your clients. Shelly Paxton, she's a soulbatical, a phenomenal woman. I know you've pitched me some other clients of yours I can't wait to meet, so it's going to be really cool. Now, I was reading about you. So when you graduated high school, and like 3 days after you graduated, you're like, I'm out. And you went to New York City. Is that right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, there's no question. Well, I grew up modeling. So I started modeling when I was probably like 10 or 11. And so it was just a natural progression to then go to New York City, which is like the hub of the fashion world. So that's what I did.
What inspired you to be an actress, to go from modeling to acting?
Well, my parents were in like music ministry. So I grew up in like doing church plays and things like that. So I always was around the arts and loved it. And I had taken a commercial acting class. I kept booking commercials. And so I was like, I should take a class. So I took a class and realized, oh, wow, this is my passion. So I stopped. I had worked like Benz Fashion Week and done, some amazing modeling jobs, but I decided I was going to put all my focus on acting. So I started training and then, went from there.
So as a person, as an actor, when you interview, I always like to ask actors this. So when you have an audition, how do you separate between what's called the quote rejection versus you as a person?
That's a great question. Well, one of the things, I'll never forget, in one day between modeling castings and auditions, I was told I was too tall, too short, too fat, and too thin. And so talk about like a mind, right. Like it's a little crazy. So for me, it's just letting go. So one of the things I love is the fact that I have a production and PR company. So when I go into an audition, I no longer have that desperation. There are many actors who just reek of desperations of like, it's this or nothing else. You know what I mean? And for me, I have a thriving career outside of it. So I look at it like, yes, it would be amazing to book the thing, but also if not, like I got to go check on my clients or I got to go produce an event. And so it's usually when I can just take the sides and throw them in the trash, not out of disrespect, but just simply out of like, okay, cool. I've done the thing. I let it go. I'm releasing it. And it's this or something better. So when I'm able to do that, usually those are the things that I book. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with that because we're in similar things as far as the entertainment space. But for me, I remember when I first started, I would get lots of no's, and so no to this, no to that, and it wasn't always like this, but just like you as well, I realized I don't need everybody to like me. I just need one person to like me. Yep. So if someone's closed that door, well, that's one less person I have to worry about. So now let me look again for the person who is going to open that door, and that's that's how it works for me, is because. Once again, you don't need everybody, just that one person. When that happens, then all of a sudden, when you can let those things go, then it changes it. And all of a sudden, doors do open for you. And it's easier to let things go because, once again, a closed door is not a negative thing. It just simply means you just need to pivot and figure out what else to do. And so that's kind of been my lesson that I learned as well.
It's so good. And I love that. And that really, resonates because one of the things that I say daily is I ask God or the universe to make it abundantly clear for me and to guide my steps, ordain my path, and shut the door if it's not meant to be. Yes. And so there have been many times in my career where all of a sudden the door will shut and it feels so out of the blue. But I know when that happens, I'm truly being guided,
Yes. And I appreciate that because sometimes, and I'm sure you've had many wonderful opportunities like, yes, this is amazing. And then when it closes, there's the first response and the second response. The first response is our disappointment, whatever, and the second response is then the second response is, now what do I do with that information? And so for you have that awareness that, oh man, this is great, but the door was closed. So now the secondary response is, thank you, God, for closing this, because now I know that you were directing and ordering my steps.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think that's where some people struggle, is because they don't get to that secondary response of, what do I do with this information? They get stuck in the
Right.
grief and loss, which is an appropriate time of grieving. But once you have that
Totally.
awareness on the other side,
Yep.
what do I do?
Yep. And it's hard because it's like there's some characters where it's like I fall in love with the character,
Mhm.
you know? And so it's like,
Yeah.
you know, it feels like a part of your heart breaks, but at the same time, it's like you just have to continue to fill your cup with such great goodness on the other side that
Yes.
it, you know, you're okay.
Exactly. I've worked, I had Michelle Danner on my show. She's a really well-known LA actor out there. And I was asking her the question, like, how do you take someone's emotion, your own self? So Noel's personality, how do you take that and connect that with your character? How do you do that, but not get lost in it?
It depends. So, for me, preparation, it's weird because on one hand, it's like preparation is everything. But on the other hand, there are times where like, because sometimes you're only given, you know, like you have 12 pages of sides, but you're given them at 6 o'clock at night and your audition is at 10 a.m. the next day. And so it's, you know, sometimes you're not allotted that preparation.
Yeah,
And
the
so
backstory
it
of
really
it.
comes down to, right? It comes down to substitution, like what you're able
Yeah.
to substitute. And then also, you know, truly organically how I feel in the moment. So even if it says on the page, like she's sobbing and breaking down and whatever, but in the moment I want to laugh, I allow myself to do that because it's, you know, everybody loves authenticity, right?
Yes,
And
that's
so,
right.
you know,
I
when
like
you can
that.
just be your organic self, regardless of what it says, usually that's the person that's going to stand out and that's the person that's going to book the role, or they're not going to book that role, but they're going to be remembered and they're going to be brought back in for another role.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, it kind of depends. There's, have you heard of Marie Forleo?
I feel that name sounds familiar. Remind me who that is.
She's sort of like the female Tony Robbins, and her partner is someone named Josh Pace, and Josh is an actor, and he also runs something called Committed Impulse, which is like acting classes. And so his philosophy, he has 4 steps, and I apply this to everyday life. I think every person can do this, but I also apply it to acting. So it's breathe. See the room, feel the sensations, I'm back. And what that means is at any given moment in this conversation or someone that's listening or watching, somebody's going to check out and they're going to go into their head. Oh God, did I leave the stove on? Or like, my dog is barking. Is my dog okay? Whatever it is, right? And then it's like, oh, no, I'm not paying attention. Okay, I'm back. And so in the moment, in the audition room, something can happen where, let's say a producer all of a sudden takes out his phone. And so you're in the middle of an audition and you clock that a producer takes out his phone. Some actors can go into, oh my God, I suck. I'm the worst actor in the world. They're not paying attention. And it takes you out of the moment. So instead of going down that sort of rabbit hole, you breathe, because 9 times out of 10, we're holding our breath anyway.
Yes, exactly.
You feel the sense, right? Especially when we're nervous. You feel the sensations without a judgment. So like, if I were nervous, you know, we can't tell the difference between being nervous and being excited. Right. So for me, I always flip it to like, oh my God, I'm excited. And so, you know, right. And so you feel the sensation without labeling, just feel it. Like right now, I feel a little bit of tightness in my throat. So I'm just aware, cool. See the room, meaning, okay, so right now I see, you know, your eyes look a little hazel. You have like a green shirt with stripes, right? Like really see the person and then cool, I'm back, meaning like I'm in it, I'm present. And so I love that because that's just something that I apply in every day. And so back to your question, you can also apply that to, you know, a moment where, you know, maybe someone is trying to conjure up something that feels a bit contrived. Instead, let me do those 4 steps so that I'm back and I'm present, and that's enough.
I really like that. So let me piggyback off that from a psychological approach. So as you know, my field is in psychology. And so we call that grounding. And so from a psychological approach, when you breathe, because what happens is we know when people who struggle with anxiety, oftentimes when they have like a panic attack, not all they do, I don't want to minimize. When they breathe, they inhale, and when they inhale, they forget to exhale. And so often that's why people have this panic attacks, because like, I can't breathe. And you're right, you can't, because they've taken so many small inhalations that they can't breathe as well. So I always tell people it's counterproductive when you are struggling. When you exhale, It allows yourself to relax. And that's one way to get out of a panic or a thought struggle in the moment. But yours as well is great too, because when you have that inhalation, you get all the oxygen. And most of the time we have so much nitrogen at the bottom of our lungs that we don't realize that over time, that doesn't help us because we need oxygen. So what you're also doing is you're grounding. So you're using your 5 senses. So I always tell people, if you get too much in your head, when you ground, like you said, you want to read the room, use your visual, your sense of sight. What do you hear? What do you touch on your pants? Is there a candle? Or do you smell something? Whatever it might be. So the more of your 5 senses you use, it really grounds you to the moment. And so I love the fact that you do that all the time. This person's taught you that, and because I definitely want to get behind that as well, because it allows people to realize that they're safe, they're okay. That me connect with someone, and that is so
exactly
important.
And that's what we crave in life, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of that, so I think that's a great transition into, because you do a lot of lifestyle and health and wellness. How did you get into that space? Because it sounds like you really thrive with that.
Yeah, well, so I was the kid that, like, my parents would shop at health food stores, and like I wasn't allowed to drink dairy milk. Like I drank rice milk growing up. And so, it was always sort of just like in my genes and my DNA. And however, in 2011, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. And so the route that she took was very integrative. And that's when, I really sort of embodied the fact that, it's not for me and for my mom, it wasn't about just going to a doctor and being told what to do. It's really like mind, body, soul approach. Yes. And so it's something that I'm very passionate about, because I've seen it firsthand affect, my mom passed away in 2016, and I now am having health stuff that I'm dealing with. And so it's just something that is really important to me.
Yes. And I think that's so important because, and I say this respectfully as a licensed practitioner myself, it's so important for any person to be in charge of their health and wellness. There's amazing, wonderful doctors and obviously, as like I said, licensed person, but you also are in charge of your life and your recovery and your thriving. And so it's so important, once again, for everyone to look at a holistic approach. You have the Western medicine, Eastern medicine, you have so many wonderful things, and to get a well-balanced opinion and many opinions to create the healthiest response for you. And once again, this is not an endorsement for anything other than just simply a person is in charge of their life.
Being your own advocate.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. As a CEO of one's life, you get to figure that out. What does that mean? And so to explore all that, and it's not always cookie cutter. There's so many different ways in which things can happen or things can be treated. So I'm so glad that you, unfortunately with your mom, I'm so sorry, but you learned for yourself what's happening for you, what works for you. And so that's why you are now, once again, in this health and wellness space as well. Now, did I say that you worked with Deepak Chopra?
Yeah.
How did that? Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, Deepak's amazing. So how my company sort of started was I went from modeling to producing at Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week, and a woman approached me who is now a New York Times bestselling author and very well known. And she was like, "Oh my God, you have to come work for me. You have to produce all my events." And so I went home and Googled, how do you produce a book launch or whatever it was. Like, I was like, oh, sure. Right. And so I just, started saying yes to things. And so even if I didn't necessarily know how to do it in the moment, I would figure it out. It's like sort of that stick-to-itiveness. And so from there, everything became word of mouth. And so Deepak had heard, working with, people like Gabby Bernstein and Chris Carr and some of these best-selling authors, Deepak heard about me. And so he then hired me. And so, it's just all been, I think when you work hard and you sort of plant the seeds and you sow the crop, they'll bloom to fruition. And I always say all roads lead to Rome. And I know that's very cliche, but I look back at the sort of trajectory of my career and I see how when I was doing something in the moment, I didn't understand what it meant, but years later, it's like, that was, so this could happen.
I always like to tell people that, and my listeners have heard this many times, is our life is like every event is like a jigsaw puzzle
Mm-hmm.
piece. And so
Yeah.
every event, when it links together, it creates the picture, and that's who we are today. So some of
Yeah.
those jigsaw puzzle pieces, you look, you pull out a jigsaw puzzle at home, when you look at it, you're like, where did this even go? This doesn't even make sense. It looks like they left one out, or this is for a different puzzle, because it just doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. So when you look at it, but when you find where it goes, you're like, well, that links with this one. With this one.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean you like it or don't like it, because as we
Right.
know, a rainbow can't happen unless there's sunshine and rain. And so we know
Right.
that. So when you link all that together, it creates who you are. And so when people take the snapshot of, am I okay today? Do I like myself today? I may not, but I'm working towards that. And if I'm working towards that, then all those events that I didn't like, all those
Right.
beautiful events that I love, they create
Yeah.
me today. And I'm
Yep.
fearfully and wonderfully made. And so I know that
Yeah.
all is well. And so with that, it really boils down to, just like you didn't understand it at the moment, but all those jigsaw puzzle pieces, when they link together, created you and your brand, which is phenomenal.
Totally. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. So what is next for you?
Oh man. Well, so I just went through a really gnarly transition. So I moved to LA about 2 years ago, and I've always been like super active and, running a company, doing like, 5 to 8 auditions a week, running around.
Oh, wow.
And I started to get really sick. And it didn't really make sense because I eat healthy. I do that, like I do all the things. I check all the boxes and what you're supposed to do to live a healthy life. And long story short, we found out that our home had mold toxicity. And as a result, I apparently have late stage chronic Lyme disease. I had no idea.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
But the mold activated the Lyme disease and the co-infections and caused fibroid tumors to grow. And it's just been like a really crazy experience. And so as a result of that, my husband and I not only had to move, we had to get rid of 95% of our stuff.
Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. But also I am really grateful because I'm now sort of like getting on the other side, because now we've been living in our new mold-free home for 3 weeks. And already we both feel so much healthier. And I know that I'm healing. And, while it was really hard to say goodbye to like invaluable memorabilia that was my mom's or whatever it was, like it was really difficult. At the same time, it's taught me that stuff is just stuff. And, whenever I would want to hold on to something desperately, I would hear, do you want your health or do you want your things? And so, it was just, it's been really powerful and really beautiful. And in a million years, I never would have thought I would become like a minimalist. Like I love my things. But now it's like we live in this big home and there's nothing in it. And I'm totally okay. And not only am I okay, I'm healing. And so for me, I'm actually taking the next 2 months off to just heal. So for me, that looks like going to the beach and being in nature and drinking coconut water in the sunshine and just really allowing myself to do nothing. I'm someone who's worked since I was 15 years old. And so it's a scary thing to take a couple months off. Like that's terrifying. And at the same time, it's also, I feel really grateful and fortunate that I'm able to, and I'm just going to say, no, I'm just going to heal and do what that takes. And because another thing I realized too is like wealth without health means nothing. So it's like I was, working sometimes 60, 80 hours a week, but I was so sick. So what's why? Like, how is that? So I'm sort of in this weird transition phase. So while that's happening, I'm also going to be writing a book about my story. It's called In the Limelight.
That's good.
Right. And so it's just going to be about like claiming divine sovereignty over our bodies. And, initially doctors wanted me to do something very specific. And had I done that in that moment, I would have never found out about the Lyme disease. I would have never found out about the mold. And then I would have gotten sick again. So it's just like, it's like you said earlier, like getting second and third opinions and trusting your intuition. One of the things I was going to do was fly out to the East Coast to get treatment for the Lyme disease. And what I was going to film a documentary series around it, and I had the crew lined up. I had all of it was set. literally the night before my flight, I told my husband, I go, I can't go. And he's like, what? And I go, I don't know why. I can't go. I'm not supposed to go. I have and he's like, don't you want to heal? And of course I'm like, yes, of course.
Yeah.
But I couldn't go. And I had to trust my intuition. And then a couple months later, we found out that our home had mold. And so what that means is if I had gone to the East Coast, I would have spent like 30 grand out of pocket to get treatment. I would have come back to California to my home with the mold, and it would have reactivated everything. And it would have been a wash. And so it just, again, it's like, I can't emphasize the importance on trusting, whether you call it intuition or Holy Spirit or whatever you want to call it, like really trusting that and honoring it and knowing that you're being guided. And so, and then after a couple months, then I'm going to film a project, and, like I have several things in the works, but right now they're just a little bit of a ways away, and it's exciting and also a little nerve-wracking.
Yes. Well, and thank you so much for sharing all that. I'm super excited for that, because I know once you have that downtime, because when we have, let me back up. One of my favorite quotes is divided waters lose force. So we do too much. Sometimes we forget that the efficacy or how efficient or how productive we can be good at it, but it could maybe a little bit more focused. And so the fact that you get to take, this is my opinion, but the fact that you get to take that time off and to regroup, and so you have all these projects, and now you'll go back laser focused, and now you'll jump to a whole new level of what that looks like in your production and your writing and all of that. So it's super exciting. I know it's scary, but once again, you're putting your health first, and that's the most important thing.
Thank you.
Well, I've had such a pleasure having you on my show. If my listeners want to find out more information about you, to watch all of your stuff, to work with you, where will they find all this information online?
So you can go to my production website, which is just noelelieproductions.com, and productions is plural, or you can follow me on the gram. I'm super active there at Noel_Elie, and you can check out my IMDb page and, follow along. And I'd love to connect with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Noel, for being a wonderful guest on my show. So I had a great time with you.
Thank you. Me too. Thanks for having me.